when you're telling the electors, this would be a first. You want the electors to get this intelligence data. I'm taking the leap that it will prove that Russia acted to interfere in the elections, that Russia moved to hack the elections. Wait a minute, I'm going to, just for the sake of argument. Then, what do you want the electors to do with that information?
I haven't seen it, so I can't prejudge it. Right now, what I want is the information. What I want is for you not to put words in my mouth that will risk my safety. What I want you to do is discuss accurately what I am saying, which is the public has a right to know, and the electors have a right to know. Do what with it? Do what with it? What if all the Republicans look at this information and they look at it and they vote the way they were voted in their states? You, Christine Pelosi, would be okay with that? Yes or no? What I want first is to get the information. I'm not going to prejudge something I have not seen. I do not know what it is that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party is facing vis-a-vis possible blackmail threats, possible continuing hacking threats. But I'm very concerned about it as an American citizen.
Are you
I'm certainly concerned about it as a member of the Electoral College. So it's not just what the electors do, it's what the senators do in their confirmation stuff. So when all is said and done, let's get the information and talk about it.
When all is said and done, will you ever look at what happened in the election as a sign that Hillary Clinton didn't win it because Hillary Clinton botched it, because Hillary Clinton's message didn't resonate, period?
Well, I think that as I said before, when someone wins or loses an election, there isn't just one factor. Again, if 80,000 people vote differently,
did Hillary Clinton make any mistakes at all?
Do we say that? Well, I've been complaining about mistakes that were made since the beginning. So do you want me to go back and talk about the comments I made on the record in the summer of 2015?
I might have missed that, Christine. Where did she botch it?
All right, let's start, I think, chronologically. Let's go back a year and a half ago. I thought that the Democratic National Committee officials who were trying to limit the number of presidential debates made a mistake, and I told them that several times. I thought that, and said that publicly at the Democratic National Committee meeting in August of 2015, when we were fighting to have a very robust economic message, including the Fight for 15 resolution that I authored and that we passed.
That's fair.
I was hoping that we would have more opportunity to mobilize the grassroots around that message. Instead, that request fell on deaf ears.
All right, so let's fast forward to the general election. Any final verdict there where Hillary Clinton might have botched it?
When Sanders staffers were accused of taking some of the information off the voter files, you might remember that the response of the DNC was to cut the entire Sanders campaign off from taking a look at those records.
In the general election, any comments on the, we're now in the general election, any comments there?
You can't do that. That's the equivalent of the death penalty for a campaign the day before a debate. So there have been several times when I felt that
in the general election, one thing in the general election she botched. One thing, Christine, that she botched in the general election.
I felt that once we had come out of the convention and done very well, I thought that what we needed to do was to have a more robust cooperation to help the down-ticket races. I would have liked to have seen that. Like everybody else, I think that everybody else who was making calls to swing states, more phone calls, more presence by the candidate is better. And I haven't looked at all of the data, but what I see, and I don't fault Hillary Clinton for this per se, because she's receiving information from her analysts. But one of the things we're talking about as members of the Democratic National Committee, as we pick our new chair, is what was the targeting data? Did they understand the report that we gave to our congressional candidates in June that talked about where Trump had done well? There were three factors in common: stagnant wages from 2004 to 2014, industries shuttered or changed due to globalization or automation, and what they called white distress in the workplace. That is to say, a lower percentage of white men in the workplace. We were focused on that economic message with the House candidates very clearly.
To those affected groups than Hillary Clinton.
I didn't feel that their targeting by the national campaign took that as much into account as perhaps they should have. And there is going to be an existential debate about that, I think, as we go forward, which is how do we reinforce the economic message we were talking about right before the Comey letter hit, Hillary came to San Francisco, and she got a standing ovation for talking about jobs, including modernizing the electric grid. Now, maybe that's something we only stand and cheer for here, but we talked about it.
All right, Christine, but you were just mentioning real substantive issues that Donald Trump had bested Hillary Clinton that had nothing to do with the Russians. You mentioned James Comey. That might or might not have been a factor. I'm not smart enough to know.
No, but
you mentioned legitimate issues that were shortcomings on the part of the Clinton campaign.
Well, as I said, there's a kaleidoscope. But let me tell you, when we were calling, we were phoning, this is what happened every morning. We would wake up, look and see if on WikiLeaks to see if we were there, to see if there was something that we had said that was suddenly going to be the subject of an internet attack. That would take precious time out of our day. When the Comey letter hit, we were doing get out the vote calls. So it was early voting. So rather than calling and saying, hey, Neil, this is Christine calling, this is where your polling place is, Neil would suddenly ask, hey, well, what about this Comey report and what's going on with Anthony Weiner, and explain to me all of these things about this investigation. So that's a time suck. So even if after, say, a 5 or 10 minute conversation, you, Neil, say, okay, well, thanks for the information, I'm going to go vote now, I've now wasted time on explaining Comey rather than just sharing with you, here's your polling place, go to it.
I think Donald Trump had a few issues that he was dealing with as well, right?
We saw undecideds go, we saw yeses go to undecideds. We were calling the yeses saying, go vote. Now the yeses were dropping to undecideds. And as even Republicans noted, 20 million Americans voted early while Hillary Clinton was under a cloud of suspicion from the FBI. I think the first letter was very hurtful. I know it was because I was physically on the phone with those people.
I don't think Donald Trump was without criticism. I don't think Donald Trump was without criticism and videotapes and comments and allegations that would dwarf any and all of that. All I'm just saying is, besides this Russian stuff, a factor clearly, I don't dismiss the fact that they could have had a mischievous role in all of this. I think the fact that you pointed out, as you did very early on, some of these issues affected the outcome of this race beyond any of these outside events, right?
Well, again, you can't. I don't know which is beyond what. Again, Bannon made it very clear that they had a voter depression strategy. They said we have to suppress her vote among African Americans, young people, and Sanders voters. Of course, some people, fitting one or more categories.
Or she just could have been a lousy candidate.
And that's what those.
Or she just could have been a lousy candidate.
Well, I don't know that a lousy candidate wins the popular vote by 3 million more votes than her opponent. So I think there are millions of Americans who didn't feel that way. So out of respect for both people who were motivated by Trump and motivated by Clinton, I don't know that we can insult all of their voters by assuming that they were only choosing the lesser as opposed to the person they saw as the greater candidate. And there was a lot of enthusiasm among people, particularly among a lot of women and volunteers that I worked with for 2.5 years about
just not
what
enough
it meant
to close
to elect
the deal.
the
Not
first
enough
woman
to close
president,
the deal.
what it meant to elect a very qualified person to the presidency. And hey, she won my state almost 2 to 1. So as far as I'm concerned, we saw a lot of enthusiasm.
Well, you include all the candidates, Christine, all the candidates. More people voted against Hillary Clinton than voted for her. So if you look at it all, but you're right, the election's over. We got to move on, right?
Well, what we have to do is take a cold, hard look at two things. Number one, from the standpoint of what was the role that was played by the Russians. What is the CIA news report? We weren't talking about this last Friday. It came up in the news Friday night. So
Christine, we have a hard break coming up. I gave you a lot of time to get into this. I'm glad you raised a lot of very solid points. We'll see where this goes. Christine Pelosi, thank you very, very much.